Hello, I'm Alex Comer and this is my 19.2 presentation. So first thing I'm going to be talking about is an introduction to bouldering. So bouldering is a sport that can be done indoor or outdoors, and it's very similar to rock climbing, and it uses a wall and you have to climb up it. But instead of rock climbing having harnesses and ropes and everything, you only use your body. You have no ropes or anything, so it's a bit more dangerous. There's a lot of competitions in bouldering, and lots of high-end professionals doing it. So that's an introduction to bouldering. The next thing we'll be doing is a risk assessment for bouldering. So there are lots of hazards to do with bouldering. So one of the hazards is falling or slipping off the rock face. So the people at risk here are the people watching and the climber. So the controls in place here are that if you're doing it indoors, that there are soft mats on the floor, so it won't hurt the climber if they fall. And there's a maximum wall height of 20 feet, so if they do fall, then it's not going to be the worst thing in the world. The risk rating, so the severity of it is how actually bad the injury could be, or how bad it could affect the person, and the probability is how likely that it will be. So with bouldering, as you don't have any harnesses, it could be quite likely for you to fall off the rock face. So the probability of it would be 2, because it's not entirely likely, but it's still quite likely. But the severity of it could be really bad. It could result in a broken leg, or unconscious. So the severity of it is 3, and then you times those together. So 3 times 2, that's 6. So that's the total overall score is 6. So that means it's a very bad thing that could happen, and it's quite likely. So some other comments are that the people who work at the bouldering facility will need to check the boulders are tightened and that the mats are positioned in safe places every morning, so that participants won't pull a rock and it will fall out of the wall and they won't fall onto the hard just ground. They'll have something underneath. Another hazard is clothing getting caught on the boulders. So this is the people at risk here is the climber. So the controls in place. So you need to make sure that all participants have tight clothing, so that it's much harder for it to get caught on the boulders. And the risk rating, so the severity of it is 1, the probability of it is 1, because it's really not likely, and it probably won't end up in a big injury. So the overall rating of it is 1. And some other comments are that you need to check before all participants go up the wall. You need to check that there is the correct clothing is worn. Another hazard is that the boulders could be too loose and you could fall back and land on the ground. So again, the participants, the climbers and watchers could be hurt here. So you'd need to tighten all boulders before use. So the severity of this could be really bad, because you could fall, break your leg, break your neck, something like that. So it's 3, but the probability is still quite high, but it's not extremely high, so it's a 2. So the overall risk rating is 6. So that is still really bad, but it's not as bad as it could be. So you'd need to get a rotor to check that all boulders are tightened, and if any are loose, then tighten them up. So another hazard is that the participant could pull a muscle, and this would be the climber. And so the controls in place here is make sure that you do a good warm-up, so that no one has the probability of pulling a muscle. So the risk rating here, the severity of it is 2, because it could be quite a bad pull and you could be out of sport for quite a while. But the probability of it would still be quite high, because a lot of people people think that doing a small warm up is sufficient, where you need to actually do quite a big warm up and get your body warm so you don't pull a muscle, so the overall risk rating is 4. And some other comments are that you need to make sure that all instructors give warm ups before anyone gets on the wall, and put up signs around the place to tell people to warm up and maybe give some instructions on what they could do to warm up. And then the last hazard here is that the climbers could collide, so the people at risk here are the climbers, so you need to make sure that that people are watching the climbers and that the climbers don't go up the same part of the wall, they're always separated. So the severity of this is 2, because colliding with participants, they can fall off and they can really hurt themselves. But the probability is 1, because it's really highly unlikely that 2 people will collide with each other on the wall. The overall risk rating is 2. So you need to make sure that there is always someone watching whilst the climber is on the wall, and you need to make sure that signs are put up to tell climbers to keep well apart. So the next part I'm going to talk about is the personal protective equipment. So this is stuff that you'll wear or have on to make it less likely for you to hurt yourself. So for bouldering, you'd need to have tight clothing so it doesn't get caught on any of the boulders. You'd need to have chalk on. You need to have chalk in your hands so you can get better grip so you don't slip off. And you need climbing shoes so that you can get good grip on the boulders with your feet, and it'll be highly unlikely that you'll slip off and hurt yourself. So some of the emergency procedures, so if you're out doing bouldering on an actual rock face and you find yourself, like, you fall down and you break your leg, if you're with someone and they know first aid, then they can perform first aid on you. But if you're on your own, then you might want to send out a distress signal or call someone for help if you have signal on your phone. These are all good ways of getting yourself help as quickly as possible. And some environmental factors for bouldering are that whilst you're bouldering, if you're out on a rock face, then you could grab part of the rock and it could crumble away, and lots of environmental agencies are getting angry with boulderers because they are going up rocks and they're causing harm to the environment as they're climbing up the rock. So that is some of the environmental factors. So now I'm going to talk about snowboarding. So snowboarding is an extreme sport where you will be on the snowboard and you'll go down snowy mountains. It's extremely fun, and there are lots of competitions to it, and there are lots of competitions, and it's a very widely popular sport. So I'm going to be talking about doing a risk assessment again. So a hazard for snowboard is losing balance and breaking ankle after fall. So whilst you're snowboarding down a mountain, you might turn one way but have your board the wrong way, so you fall into the snow, and because your feet are fixed to the board, it's really difficult to get yourself out of it, so it's a lot easier to break your ankle. So the people at risk here are the participants. So what you can do is book an instructor so that you learn how to keep yourself balanced on board, and so that there's less risk of you falling over from losing your balance and hurting yourself. So the severity of this is 2, and the probability is 2, so the overall risk rating is 4. Some other comments are that you need to make sure that all participants are taught how to snowboard so that they won't fall off in a bad way and hurt themselves. Another hazard is that someone could crash into a tree and fall unconscious. This is again the participant. So what the guides around the mountain would need to do is put up barriers at the side of each run, so that if a participant was to go into a tree, go off course, then they would just go into the barrier, and that would stop them and reduce the risk of any injury. So the severity of this would be really high if you're crashing into a tree. So it would be 3, but the probability is not very likely, so it would be 1, so the overall is 3. So you need to make sure that barriers are checked every day or twice a week, so that they're perfectly in place and so that they'll stand and not harm anyone or just fall over if you crash into them. Another hazard is colliding with another snowboarder. So this is participants and other snowboarders, well, just all snowboarders really. So you need to make sure that everyone, like, so that there are guides on the mountains to tell people if they're getting too close to another person. So and make sure that everyone is aware of their surroundings, so that they can look behind them and see that there's another person close to them, so they can get distance away from them, and get the guides to like issue warnings, like you've got too close to that person. If I see you doing that again, then there'll be a repercussion or something. So the risk rating here is 3 because crashing into someone could lead to broken bones or being unconscious. But the probability is quite high because there are so many people on the mountain. So the overall risk rating is 6. So you need to make sure that guides let people know if they're getting too close to other people on the slope, so that it reduces the risk of it happening. And the final hazard is avalanches going down the mountain. So this will be every single person on the mountain will be at risk here. So what you need to make sure is that at the start of the week, make sure that all the barriers put in place to stop avalanches are secure, so that if an avalanche does happen, they'll slow it down, and also have controlled explosions to reduce the risk of an avalanche happening again. So the severity here is very high. It could lead to death possibly, but the probability of it happening is only 1 because it's highly unlikely. So the risk rating is 3. So other comments are that you need to make sure that all barriers are checked regularly so that they work and that there are controlled explosions, so that it reduces the risk of it happening. So the personal protective equipment here, you need to wear a helmet, snow boots or specific boots to wear snowboarding, and specific warm clothing with padding in it, so that if you do fall, it won't hurt as much, and the helmet will reduce the risk of going unconscious or causing massive damage to your head. So here, if you do find yourself alone, or if you're with a friend, they can perform first aid on you if you've fallen over and hurt yourself, or you can go find a guide somewhere and they'll come and help. So you can call for help, or if you'll find yourself stranded on your own, then you can do a distress signal so that rescue teams can come and get you and chop you off the mountain. So some environmental factors with snowboarding are that it can cause avalanches. So if you're snowboarding off-piste and you go onto a part where not many people have been before and it's really fresh snow, then that can cause the snow to become really loose and cause an avalanche. It can destroy the environment if an avalanche does happen, or if you hit trees or anything, you can cause harm to the environment, and also other people crashing into other people, that can cause harm to them. So my next thing I'm going to talk about is wakeboarding. With wakeboarding, it's similar to snowboarding, except you're on the water and you're pulled along by a boat. Again, there are lots of competitions with this, and it's very fun, but also very difficult to learn. This is part 1, and we'll be continuing with part 2 in a second.